I'd like to introduce Paul. He's our moderator. And one of the things about Paul, you've got his bio in front of you, but one of the things you guys don't know is that he plays 12 instruments. So he's very musically minded. And he's also available, he said, to play dinner music, right? So make sure you grab him for your next dinner party. So Paul will start the event and introduce all the other speakers and moderators.
It's great to be here with such a tech-savvy crowd. I'm looking forward to the VHS release of the show. My DVR isn't happening. Thanks to VLAB, to Liz, to Gigi, to Hiroshi, to Stanford GSB, to all of you for coming out. It's great to have you here. We have a terrific panel on board, a lot of great minds, a lot of people who address the music industry from a lot of different angles, and I hope we can explore a lot of ideas in a lively discussion, a lively and honest discussion, too. Yes? Okay. Ooh, someone left a credit card, and if you can tell me whose Visa Gold Partners First card this is, I'll give it to you. If you... Actually, maybe you should... Is it?
Oh, you have to read the name now.
Yeah. Last 4 digits and the 3 on the back. But if you'll indulge me, I'd like to start with a story. Being a reporter, I'm always good for a story, right? So I have an anecdotal lead, as we call it in that business. And it concerns one of our panelists, even on 2 levels. The story is this. In March of 2000, during the Noise Pop Festival in San Francisco, which happens annually, it just happened, and in fact one of our panelists, Jordan, is a partner with it, I went to see Def Cab for Cutie. He's also with Zeitgeist Artist Management, and they are the managers of Def Cab for Cutie. And in the backyard of the club, which is not very large, and which Def Cab would no longer play in now that they have been to the top of the Billboard charts, I met the band. Someone knew somebody, and a friend introduced me to someone in the band. I wish I could remember who it was, but I didn't know much about them then. And the band member, whoever he was, asked me, "Where did you hear about us?" And this was March of 2000 again. Internet music was around, but it wasn't as ubiquitous as it is today. So I told him, well, you know, I downloaded a few songs off your studio's website. There's a studio, Tiny Telephone, that I guess they'd recorded in, and there were a few MP3s lying around. And I listened to them, and well, here I am. And he said, you know, we were so upset that they put those there. You know, we spent all these months, maybe a year, working on a record, and they were just giving it away for free. I don't want this. We're in the business of selling records. And I told him, yeah, but think about it. Not only did I wind up buying your record as a result of hearing it there, but I just paid $15 to get in the door. I'd say you made out on this deal. And he said, well, when you put it that way... So I'd like to think I played a role in... No, I didn't. If I did, it was very small, and I'd be shocked if you remembered that. But the point of the story is, in addition to the conclusion that free music can be turned into money in many ways, that one man's piracy is another man's distribution channel, the point of the story is, what a different world we live in today, right? Free music is everywhere. We hear speculation that the cost of music is going downward towards 0, and that pretty soon recorded music could just be a loss leader. It could be just marketing material for selling everything else. Now, I'm somewhat of a traditionalist. I like my LP records, and I have a hard time believing that Strawberry Fields Forever is a commercial for a John Lennon t-shirt. To me, it isn't. But going forward, recorded music may be something that we just get for free, or maybe not. How do you drive people to buy music in an age when they can get it for free? How do you do all these things? We've seen a lot of changes in the industry. The cost of production is falling. There's music everywhere. Anyone can make a record in this house. So how do you know what to listen to? Well, you need discovery tools. Marketing means that much more. We have panelists who work with a discovery tool, who work with a video game maker that makes, one of our panelists is a video game maker, whose game is a distribution channel. It's a way to hear music for free and become addicted to it and maybe want to buy it or want to buy something connected to it. And that's an important thought too, that the record industry isn't the music industry. They may be two completely different things going forward. And in fact, there may not be a record industry. Anyway, how did we get here in this history? I would say that technology has driven this change. The two biggest companies driving this change are in fact not really music companies, I would say. The two most influential companies. One is a computer hardware company. I think you can all guess which one it is. The other one is a software company that didn't make it. I would say that Apple has atomized the album and made us realize that maybe a song costs $1, but an album doesn't cost $14 anymore. The defunct software company I'm thinking of is the original Napster, which made us think that maybe the price of music was $0. Or it took away the cash register between the customer and the music, and it put a tip jar in between them. So neither one was a music company expressly, but they were both technology companies that effected change. One of the lessons we can learn from Napster is that you can be massively influential, massively popular, and still fail. But going forward, technology will continue to drive change. We will see that. We have an investor who invests in companies like Pandora, internet radio, which is personalized. We have a music discovery entrepreneur in Jeff from Blip.fm who's going to make his presentation shortly. We have Dorian Porter from Moses, which does a sort of CRM function, basically, by marketing campaigns for bands via text message, and has actually gone beyond the music industry as well. We have Jessica from Tapulous, which is the game company that makes games centered around music. And we have Hammer, who has used social media in ways no one has even thought of, who has addressed the music business from so many sides, as an artist, as an entrepreneur, as the man who ran a label, as the CEO of a website, dancejam.com, and as one of the most popular men on Twitter. And we'll get to that. Is that everyone? I hope I got everyone. Okay. So I think we're ready for Jeff to come and make a presentation. On representing the music discovery side, we have Blip.fm, which is most easily referred to as Twitter for music. But it's a fun way to discover more about your friends' music and listen to playlists and a whole lot of stuff. I'll let him tell you about it. Jeff, let's bring him up here. This is Jeff Yasuda from Blip.fm.
How you guys doing tonight? All right, all right. Okay. Can you guys hear me okay? All right. Well, Paul, thanks so much for the intro, and thanks to the folks at VLAB for having me here tonight. Pretty big honor for me to present with all these well-known folks on the panel. I'd like to cover really 4 different areas tonight. Obviously, I'd love to tell you a little bit about Blip FM and what we're doing in this wild, wacky music industry. But number 2, I'd like to share a little bit about some of the challenges and pitfalls that we made as a startup. We had a pretty tough road, quite honestly, before switching our product focus to Blip FM. Number 3, though, I'd like to also talk about some of the broader challenges that music startups face. It's a pretty wild industry. There's certainly some pretty significant challenges around content costs as well, which I'd like to go into. And number 4, talk a little bit about our approach to monetize and what we're doing to actually bring money in the door in a non-dilutive fashion. So to kick it off, as Paul mentioned, yeah, we've been dubbed Twitter for music. There was a nice little anecdote that if Last.fm and Twitter were to have a love child, it'd be Blip, which I think works pretty well for us. But the Twitter paradigm or Twitter analogy works well because we've combined that micro-blog paradigm with music discovery. From a positioning perspective, though, we like to think of ourselves as a social music DJ service. Social music DJ service. And most importantly, powered by people, powered by your friends, powered by, the guy next door or down the street or in some other country. I think as a key point of differentiation, the other guys out there are pretty much just about finding you the right content. That's obviously important to us, but we're much more about finding you the right people that share your taste in music. So just as a basic use case here, you can actually sort of see the Twitter-esque elements to the site. And you can kind of think of it as maybe a dynamic playlist where your friends are adding songs in real time, maybe even a music station created by all your pals. The example I like to give is that a couple months ago I had a barbecue over at my house, so I got on Blip and I announced that I was having a little party. And I had friends from Boston, New York, Texas, LA, start to basically DJ to my party. And it was all done in real time. Now granted, you have that errant song that makes you kind of, tick, and you got to run back to the computer from time to time. But it was a cool process in terms of a real-time DJ, sort of DJ social network element. I think probably the most compelling element of Blip, though, is that everyone can be a DJ. It's very easy. Just input a song or a band that you like, and within 150 characters or less, which is, by the way, how we differentiate from Twitter, we give you 10 more characters. Type something about the band, your mood, whatever. You click OK, and that Blip, which is text plus fully streaming audio, goes out to all the people that are following you, as well as a global Blip stream. Now, as part of our distribution strategy, we've done a couple things that play nice with other social networks, Twitter, Friendfeed, Last.fm, to mention a few. So if you were to Blip on Blip FM, it shows up as a tweet on Twitter. And it was kind of fun. There was a recent study that was done by this group that got access to millions and millions of tweets. And Blip FM was actually the #2 most referred URL to an application company behind TwitPic. So it was fun for us because we're 4 dudes in a crappy garage in the dog patch in San Francisco. But I think what's interesting about it is that as Twitter's growth scales, we've seen our growth sort of follow a similar trajectory. As you guys know, engagement, though, is everything, particularly in consumer internet plays. And we've done a couple things to give credit to DJs that are active. As you can see here in the lower right-hand corner of their profile pictures, we've placed these little badges indicating how many followers a DJ has. So it might be indicative to a new user who shows up, to see maybe Grateful with over 1,000 DJs might be a better DJ than Ginty McGinters that may have just signed up yesterday. The other thing we've done is we've created a social, sort of a social currency, if you will, called props or points, which can be given at the per Blip level if you like the song, if you like the text. And it's amazing what people do for these props. The results, though, have been pretty fun for us. Our users typically spend about 30 minutes per visit on the site. And we're averaging well over 1 million minutes every day. But I think that the key takeaway is that about 90%, 80 to 90% of those 1 million+ minutes are actually from return visitors. So it's been great. We've been able to get users and keep them using the product. Okay, now this is a bit of my confessional now, which is we had some pretty tough beginnings, and we started life as Buzz.bomb, as we call it. Quite honestly, it's really how we screwed the pooch the first time, and there are a couple things that we did that really didn't work out. Number one, we took too damn long to launch. It took us over a year to get the product really out the door, and I think there was an unwillingness to experiment, and I think that hurt us. Number two, we had about 30,000 bands, and just to describe Fuzz.bomb real quickly, it was sort of a CRM platform for indie bands, for DIY garage bands, and you know, there are tools, analytics, ways for people to be able to sell their music and obviously track where their fans are located, but it was a pretty tough road to hoe. And so we have 30,000 bands or so, but we couldn't monetize them. And we've kind of learned the hard way that these DIY, do-it-yourself bands really don't have much interest in spending any money whatsoever. But I think in tandem with that, we also hoped that these indie bands would drive their fans. And unfortunately, that didn't work either. So to add fuel to the fire, we did a couple things. We thought, well, why don't we add some more features? Maybe that'll work. So we created an artist dashboard, sort of a mini Google Analytics for bands. We threw in social networks with profiles and pictures in the works. We even tried, hey, why don't we create an Evite for bands so that bands can invite their fans to gigs? No dice. A message center, threaded message center so that band members can talk to each other before talking to the venue for a gig. Nope. Then we came across what we thought was a pretty good idea. We said, okay, well, independent music by definition is local music. So why don't we create something called the local scene online to have bands in one geographic region talk amongst themselves and their fans. That was a disaster. And to finally throw it all out there, we created what we thought was a pretty interesting mixtape, which was fully three-dimensional, fully customizable. We hoped that this thing would go viral, but we even threw it up on Facebook, but to no avail. And what we found, quite honestly, at the end of all this brain damage was that more features basically creates more confusion. And there are also some pretty painful leading indicators. Number one, we had limited engagement on the product. And as you can imagine, when the product stinks, everything else fails. Company morale was a disaster, and everyone was bummed out and we couldn't figure out how to fix it. As you can imagine, there are hundreds and hundreds of internet music companies out there, and there wasn't really much of an appetite to fund yet another. And that obviously created some pretty significant problems on my balance sheet. So we were pretty much at this point up the creek without a paddle, and but something pretty amazing happened. Basically, the engineers got together and really saved the day. We, one of my engineers, Ian White's here, is one of the core guys to make this thing happen. But we always encourage our engineers to do things on the side from time to time to benefit the company. Sometimes, but I think there's a little bit of this. All right, you guys in your, you know, your towers here in management didn't figure out, so we're going to take it into our own hands. So quite honestly, maybe it was a little bit of the revenge of the nerds here, but it's probably an unwise thing to say in this venue. But I'm realizing now. Maybe we'll go back. So it's a good movie though. But I think the important takeaway here is it was the guys in the trenches that were coding every day on their, you know, coffee breaks, on their smoke breaks. They got together and said, why don't we, you know, try this concept, Twitter for Music. So they actually pitched my co-founder Brian Veneman and I about the concept. We launched it literally, and again as another feature, on Fuzz.bomb, and it was pretty amazing though, in all seriousness, that within days, it became very clear that from a metrics perspective, that Blip FM far surpassed anything that we had achieved on Fuzz. So then we had some tough decisions, and the first was to abort mission. One of the most painful things is to come up with a product, and I don't know how many folks here are, actually I am curious, how many folks here are with startups? Okay. How many folks here actually had at startups had mid-course corrections, meaning their initial product was different than their second product. Okay, all right. Yeah, I applaud all you guys, by the way, because it is very tough to get off that horse. And I think even more painful was the next thing that I had to do. I'm a first-time CEO, and one of the toughest things I had to do was cut down to what we called the core four. Brian and I obviously had very good relationships with our employees, but we cut down from 12 people to 4 in about a month's time frame. And it was one of the most painful sort of personal episodes that I went through, but something that was unfortunately necessary. Clearly with that, we minimized burn rates, with the head count, but we minimized burn all across the board. And shock horror, we actually raised capital behind this market, or I should say in this market. And but we set our closing date for September 29th, 2008. And as you probably recall, yeah. So as you may recall, September 29th was the largest single-day point decline ever. For the Dow. It dropped 778 points. And my partner and I were sitting in our offices freaking out, thinking that the wires wouldn't come through. And I think I aged about 10 years that day, but the wires did come through. But it was obviously a brave new world at this point, not to mention fueled by the famous Sequoia presentation that I'm sure every entrepreneur in this room got a copy of. Don't tell anyone, but it was obviously a pretty challenging time going forward. So with that, would like to talk about some high-level challenges that music startups face in particular. Maybe this is a VC checklist. I think more accurately, these are things that keep me awake at night. And the first question is, how are you different? Why does the world need another Flip FM or need another music startup? What's your positioning? How are you going to drive traffic? Is this a networked approach, or is this a traditional drive traffic to your own URL type of approach, which, as you know, is very, very hard to do? Number 3, you hear this all the time. How are you going to monetize? Most of the companies in this space have not figured out how to monetize, even some that are at scale. And of course, the last is, what's the basic math? What are the margins? How does a pathway to profitability even exist in this space, particularly given that if you play in the mainstream music space, it is very, very expensive. It is very, very expensive. And so these are all obviously things that we've thought a lot about. And just to share a little bit about how we monetize, really through 4 areas: referral links, obviously advertising and music marketing, as well as licensing. So let's kick it off with referral links. We're currently partnered with Amazon on the MP3 front, but I will tell you, I'm sure Jordan and others can explain that, or would agree that if you talk to most artists out there, they have never made money selling music. And I can also confirm that even as a company, selling music is pretty tough. But I do make money because of my partnership when somebody actually goes to Amazon from my site and actually ends up buying a barbecue, because I get a rev share off that. I'm actually dead serious. The other element here is on the ringtone side, specifically around CPA deals. CPA deals are anywhere from $10 to $16. Which can obviously add up pretty nicely. And then when you add tickets in there, merchandise, there are other ways to, again, potentially monetize around the music itself. Okay, now before all you guys roll your eyes on yet another advertising model, let me share a couple, sort of some of my findings. I've been spending a lot of time with ad agencies, and as you're probably well aware, they really care about 3 primary things: page views, impressions, and monthly unique visitors. And one of the things that all ad agencies will tell you is they hate it when a young startup shows up and talks about new metrics around ad units. So of course, one of the first things we did was talk about new metrics around ad units. But this was really centralized around a core theme, which is that advertisers, marketers hate wasted impressions. So we went back at them with this concept of monetizable actions. When you search for a song, when you blip, when you prop, when you re-blip, when you add a song to your playlist, when you click play. These are all monetizable actions that tell me two very, very important things. Number one, that the user's engaged, looking at the screen, and most importantly, susceptible to advertising. Number two, it tells me something about the content for that user, and most importantly, that that user likes the content. Because of the social pressures that exist on Blip or on any social network for that matter, people aren't going to DJ or blip a song that they hate. Well, maybe Paul Bananas will, but generally people don't do that. We actually talked about this today, and you're laughing. But I think fundamentally, here in this example, take Fuzzy Groove, 29-year-old male living in San Francisco, 94115. He just blipped a Metallica song. So again, chances are he likes the band. So here was an opportunity for us to be able to push an ad front and center that persists for 30 to 60 seconds right as he blipped. And we asked a couple questions around how can we target this ad a lot more to him. We said, okay, we asked, is the band playing within a 3-month period from today within a 30-mile radius of 94115? If yes, surface what we call this player bar ad. And what was fun about this is that we averaged on a click-through rate from a CTR perspective anywhere from 4 to 5x the industry average. But the thing that got us really excited is that most of the users didn't even realize they were being advertised in. We did a program with Ticketmaster and Jambase on this, and that was certainly fun. Of course, if I'm a Metallica fan, I'm going to want to know when the next performance is. The last is around licensing. We've been spending a lot of time with carriers and handset OEMs right now, which many of the major labels actually view as the next big distribution channel. And around this specifically is to license the Blip FM front end, really to launch on their networks. And this is actually parlayed pretty nicely with a partnership that we landed with Sun around Java FX, which probably some of you guys know is the second generation Java platform that they've launched. What's been exciting for us is that that Blip FM is now running on Sony Ericsson, LG devices. It has the capability to run on Windows Mobile, the BlackBerry OS, obviously the Symbian OS, as well as the Android OS. And I think most importantly, while the iPhone app, which we're going to be launching fairly soon, is an important market. Keep in mind, it's only 1% of the U.S. market. It's a loud 1%, but I'd much rather expand my mobile footprint to other handset OEMs. I'm probably over my allotted time now, but in conclusion, there's some pretty painful lessons that we learned, in some cases the hard way. The first is less is more, meaning more features do not make a better product. The best products out there are ones that are simple, that are totally intuitive, starting with Google and Twitter. Number two, don't be afraid to experiment. But if you experiment, make sure you measure with quantifiable metrics. And it's amazing. You may change a color on the page. You may change the wording. You may change placement on the page, which may have dramatic impact on user engagement. And continue to repeat that. The long tail is a long road. It pains me to say this because philosophically I believe in the long tail of independent bands out there. They're a big force. But from a company perspective, we had a hell of a time doing it. We couldn't figure it out. I wish companies the best of luck to do it, but it was really hard for us. The fourth point may seem totally obvious, but never run out of money. And most importantly, don't be afraid or ashamed to be cheap. I beat my vendors down with an ugly stick, and they hate me for it. But I think it's important to the extent that you can extend your financial runway. It's the fiscally responsible thing to do. The last point is that math and margins are key. Now I'm going to say something slightly negative, which is that, as you probably know, the funding market is completely dried up. And so most startups out there, my advice is to assume that you're not going to get funded. And this means that your business operates in a different way. I think just my belief in general is that gone are the days of just trying to build massive traffic and then figure out how to monetize later. I think nowadays it's much more a story about bootstrapping. And our belief is you make your burn rates so ridiculously low that it's not a heroic effort to actually get to cash flow neutral or cash flow positive. I think right now is an amazing time to be a startup. I think there's some great opportunities. I think that you have access to amazing people that weren't available in other markets. So if you're an entrepreneur here, I say good for you, and congratulations for still being around. With that, I'm going to close. Thanks again for having me here tonight. If you want to check out my music taste or lack thereof, check out blip.fm/Jeff, and I hope to see you on Blip someday. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeff. That was terrific. Thank you. And I think we can welcome everyone else to the panel now. So if you all want to come up, and in the meantime, I just want to remind you that while we're talking, on either flank of the auditorium, you can obtain the yellow index cards. If a question comes to mind, we'll be collecting them in about half an hour or so, and then throughout we'll be collecting them throughout. You can bring them up to you all or to the volunteers around the session. Okay. You can give them back to the volunteers on either side, and we'll get to the Q&A session that way. I'll be reading the questions when we get there, but feel free to grab one at any time. So I already began to introduce the panelists, but I'd like to sort of chat with each of you one by one, starting at the far end, if that's okay. Jordan Kurland is here from Zeitgeist Artist Management. He's the manager of DefCab for Cutie and the related project, the Postal Service. Yes?
Yep.
And some other bands, She and Him, featuring M. Ward.
Yep.
And Zoe Deschanel.
Correct.
Matt Nathanson, a few others.
Yeah.
And I'm sure if he weren't bashful about it, he'd be proud to say that he's the manager of a band that has entered the Billboard chart at #1. That's DefCab, yes? In 2007 with his latest album.
2008, actually.
2008, sorry.
No
so
problem.
you've shepherded a band, if not quite from its inception, to mass market popularity in the digital age, while record sales were falling apart everywhere else. Can you just, in a few words, just say a few words about the role technology played in making that happen?
Yeah, well, I think for DefCab for Cutie, I got involved with them. I had known them for a number of years before I started working with them officially. I started working with them in 2003, which really was where it all started to, my opinion, really started to click in terms of people finding out about music, people communicating about music virally. It's kind of the era of where, it was in that year and in 2004 where Pitchfork really became a force in terms of, they would write about a band and that band would go on to sell a lot of records. So really, it seemed like, it was the perfect time for them because they had done the touring nonstop for 5 years and built up a small fan base. And then when they started getting some more, major opportunities, like they were featured on the OC a couple times, they had, a big film trailer license, they, great press. We were able to connect the dots in the online world, and that really wasn't, prior to that point, all of us here were probably paying attention 5-6 years before that in terms of the convergence of music and technology in the online world. But really, when you think about, culture, no one was, it was really, it's only been 5, 6, 7 years that it really started to click in terms of people learning about and, more importantly, consuming music online.
Mm-hmm. And did you use social media and other? Can you talk about
social media wasn't really. Friendster.
Mm-hmm.
If anyone remembers that. Yeah. And I apologize to Jonathan, who I'm friends with, but it's. No, really, MySpace. We in 2005, right before Plans, which was our first major label record, came out. We did we unveiled the first single off the record on MySpace, and we weren't the first band to do that, but we were one of the first 5 or 6 or 7, and for some reason it all just kind of clicked right then. And I like to say that I'm a genius and I found this excellent opportunity, and all that's true, of course. But no, really, I mean, it was this amazing thing where MySpace started to get all this attention. It was literally about 2 weeks before Fox bought MySpace, and then we had this added value of all this of this press running around it and pictures of Death Cab, because this was the high-profile music thing we had done. So no, social networking didn't exist at that really on anywhere near the level we know it at this point.
So, but you were an early adopter, is what you're saying, as far as using MySpace as that distribution channel.
Yeah, I mean,
among the very first.
I've always been, you know, Death Cab, when I started managing them, didn't even have a website. So that I totally, you know, your story makes sense to me. They had, their website was a page on the Barsuk Records website, and we launched the first official Death Cab for Cutie website launched in June of 2004. You know, for us, I think with them, and part of this has to do with managing bands for a number of years who weren't selling records. I really looked at, and I still do, maybe not as much, but a lot of what's available out there is free billboard space. You know, there's unlimited opportunities to get your music out in front of people, your name out in front of people, and you know, some are gonna, you know, get your name in front of 3 people, and some it's 3 million. But yeah, we really tried to we took a lot of, you know, risks or engaged in a lot of experiments early on.
And now you're using Tapulous as a distribution channel, if you can put it that way. So,
yes.
Jessica from Tapulous, happy birthday to you. Let me be among the first to wish you, or maybe among the last at this point.
Very embarrassing, but thank you.
Okay. And Tapulous is the maker of Tap Tap Revenge, among other applications, but we're here primarily to talk about the music app Tap Tap Revenge, which is a game often compared to Guitar Hero or Rock Band. But tell us a little bit about it, and tell us about the business model behind Tapulous, if you could.
Sure. So Tapulous formed at the start of 2008, and it originally was formed as a company that thought it would sort of be the Slide or the Rock U of the iPhone. So we were putting out a bunch of different applications. They were all interconnected on our back end, and we were trying to have a social network that tied everything together. But we didn't really know which of those apps, probably, you know, amongst a handful at least at the start, would really take off. And we watched and waited as we shipped them, and it became quite clear quite quickly that Tap Tap Revenge was the runaway hit. And so today, we have millions of users on that game. It's a free game on the iPhone. We shipped version 2 of it, I guess it was about 2 weeks ago, and already we've got over 2 million users on that version. So it's the runaway hit, and that kind of met the demise of the Slide or Rock U model and sent us into the music-based gaming model. So, you know, you got to back your winner. We still do pay quite a lot of attention to the network behind Tap Tap Revenge, and that's where a lot of the value in the company lies. So we know who's using our stuff, and we make sure that we can use that information in the future to our advantage and to our partners' advantage.
Is that in your privacy policy?
I would imagine that it is. I don't have that on me. No, we don't know the specifics of who they are and where they live, but we know their device ID. We know that they're unique, and we pay attention to what they're tapping on, what they're playing, and we use those metrics so that we can make sure that we're putting the right music into the game.
And how do you choose what gets into the game? You know, who pays for what? Does it cost you money to get a song into the game? Does it cost an artist money to get his song into the game?
Well, we have a couple of different models in play. So Tap Tap Revenge is the free game, and all of the music that's in Tap Tap Revenge is gratis licenses from the record companies. So no, we don't pay for that music. And the way in which we've gotten that music has changed over time. When we were a smaller player, we, of course, had to work a lot harder to solicit the tunes that we wanted in the game. And as we've gained momentum, we find that that's less of a barrier, and we get some really amazing bands into the game, including Death Cab for Cutie, which we're really thrilled to have. So, you know, again, it's people approach us as much as we approach them now. But we do also have premium games that we sell in the App Store, and the model there is different. We do license that music, and it's a revenue share model. And so, again, we have a couple of different ways of doing things in terms of how we get the music together.
And you're venture-backed?
We're angel-funded at the moment.
Angel-funded, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. I know that Death Cab has also used Moses, which I described as playing a CRM role in the mobile sphere. Dorian Porter's among us. Hi, Dorian.
Hi.
Tell us a little bit about Mose's inception and business model and path to revenue.
Sure. So we started 3 years ago, a little over 3 years ago, with a vision around what I'll call direct connections using the mobile phone in kind of a sea of unlimited content and get it whenever you want and hop in and out. On the marketer side, including bands, that does make it more difficult to really establish kind of your own communication channel. And so we started with a vision that this could apply to many places, but really picked music as our first area that we would focus in on. I haven't decided if picking an industry that's stable and great is better than picking an industry that is completely messed up and wondering if it's a dying ship. But if startups are about solving pain points, the music industry has plenty of them. And we're basically working to apply a model that says the mobile phone's going to be important. The mobile phone's going to be relevant to try to reach people of all ages, although today you could say we focus on the 14 to 30-year-olds, but reach them directly on their phone. And so we built a model that allows bands to create what we call, mobile experiences, whether it's at a concert or in connection with campaigns that they do, where they're connecting directly with their fans on the mobile phone. And so, our path to revenue is to charge for those services. As someone pointed out, getting money from bands can be a tough road. We've tended to try to go where we think the money can be, and despite the fact that the labels are wondering what their future holds, and the management companies are consolidating, and Ticketmaster is becoming a management company and merging potentially with a live event company, given all of the flux, there still is money out there to market and sell music. And so that's what our business model currently is based on.
Terrific. Thank you. Hammer. Pleased to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
It's a pleasure to have you here. They say, F. Scott Fitzgerald said that there are no second acts in American lives. And I think you're on to your third or fourth. It's a treat to have you here. You have you have done mid-course correction. You've changed courses in the middle of the stream.
Sure.
And you've had your toe in many different waters in the music industry, from recording artist to label owner. I think I left out reality TV star, not really music industry, but related. And now you have almost 250,000 people carrying what you had for breakfast on Twitter. How did it get to be this way? What's the role of technology in your entrepreneurship right now?
Well, let's start with the last part first.
Mm-hmm.
I never approached Twitter from the aspect of them carrying what I'm having for breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
My approach was that as a content creator, if I'm able to reach an audience that is opting in, then at some point when it's time to market and or promote what I'm doing, it is better for me, and certainly a better value proposition, for me to be able to reach them directly than have to pay a radio station, a middleman, any of the middlemen, the 5 or 6 that come in the way every time an artist creates content and say, hey, I'm going to build a business around your content, and maybe not have to pay you, but maybe you'll pay me. So I looked at that. So I thought, wow, why not learn, and we're dealing with Twitter right now, but why not learn to create or capitalize on these platforms as a creator of content and then build a business around it myself? So being an early adopter on Twitter, I looked at their platform and I said, of all the platforms right now, and I respect all of them, there's some great businesses, Twitter cut to the chase faster. It is the best of the real-time web that I saw. It was like immediate. So we might talk about what I'm having for breakfast for a while, but you can bet you're paying for lunch. So it's certainly, I don't even have the patience for trivial things too long. We'll talk small talk for a little while, but we'll get to some substance rather quickly because it's the nature of who I am. You know, most of the guys and lady on the panel, I know Dorian. The minute he started his company, he'll tell you, I found him in his garage. Is that not correct?
That's a true story.
I found him in his garage. He's in a garage out here in Palo Alto, and he opens his door one day, and Hammer's standing there.
I can finish this because he said, "Are you Moses?"
True story.
And I said, "No, I'm the CEO." And I think he said, "Does that make you God?"
These type of stories can be repeated throughout the valley concerning me and anybody having to do anything with rich media, i.e. YouTube. You go on YouTube and you'll look and you'll find a video of me at YouTube when they had 3 computers and they're showing me around the place, because I've always been interested in the next technology or the next platform that would shorten the distance between creation and consumer. And I didn't want to be left out of this great business that from an artist standpoint I love. I would make music for free forever. But the thought of continuing to facilitate other business models as the business of creation is deemed not monetizable. It's not monetizable, but we can build industries around it. It's not monetizable, but we can fund and invest in businesses around the content. Something wasn't right with that particular proposition for me. And so I said, you know, I'm going to learn early on who's creating what and try to be an early adopter on these platforms. So that's how I ended up with 250,000 people knowing what I'm having for breakfast.
And do you in the longer run, do you see that feeding into monetizing the music itself, the content itself, as being for sale, or do you expect to make your money more in other places going forward? Tell me a little bit about that.
So all of the above, but in phases. The problem that we have right now is behavior. And once a behavior is learned, it's hard to undo it. So you're not going to undo, per se, the behavior of a person just wanting a single. But remember, that behavior is only, at best, an 8-year to 10-year behavior. Most who are over 25 and 30 here grew up loving albums. They grew up with so there's another behavior that's locked away in the memory. I'm not saying that all of a sudden everybody's going to want an album and it's going to start over, but I will say that some bands and some artists are going to make great albums, and you're going to want the whole album. How that album is introduced to you to create the demand for the whole album is where social media and all of these other platforms come into play. So to that extent, I think that music is monetizable going forward, and there's a way to reintroduce and relearn some old behaviors. Some old habits are not necessarily bad. So that album appetite is still there, but you got to have a great album. And then you have to use social media and other platforms to help introduce it. And you may not monetize it with the first 2 or 3 pieces, but again, it's like anything else. Give them a taste, say you want the rest, you have to buy the rest. So it's just one aspect of it.
Gotcha. All right, thank you. Larry Marcus from Walden, VC is among us. I mentioned Pandora as one of your investments, but I know you've invested elsewhere in the music industry too, yes? Can you tell us a little bit about some of your other holdings or elsewhere in media that touch on the music industry?
Sure. Well, first, I want to say that I saw Hammer at a rodeo in Salinas. He really brought the house down. It was packed. It was an incredible show. So when he plays live, you've got to be there. He's got a great dance troupe. So
Savage Beast too, we should say.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, you know, what I love about music is that it's a true passion for people. They spend a lot of time hunting it down, and, you know, good times and bad, people, you know, just love it. And it's a mass media thing. In the case of Pandora, you know, it's really crossed over where it's actually the biggest radio station in a lot of the major local markets now. And, you know, it just is delivering great music to people, and I think, you know, radio remains, you know, really the most interesting way for the mass market to listen to music, because when the music stops and you're futzing through your playlist and you're sick of your music on your iPod, it's great to just have the music keep playing and keep feeling that joy of discovery. But the other thing that's really struck me is, when I got this iPhone, and it reminded me that it feels kind of like we're in the internet in 1995, where you're almost like on DOS with dial-up with these phones. And here you are, and it's like, the Macintosh came out, and wow, I mean, this thing is amazing. I mean, it's a computer, it's got GPS, you actually talk to it and sing to it, and this is an amazing music platform, and it's going to enable incredible services, and because it's successful, every single phone maker is going to come out with an app store and is going to come out, enable these apps. So, this is really the most kind of exciting thing that I've seen in digital media. And the unit numbers are just staggering. I mean, this thing selling, 14 million units last year, basically. These are huge installed bases. So I think this is pretty cool stuff. So if you've got, cool apps, I definitely want to hear about it.
Mm-hmm. Everyone here is engaged in the mobile space. Yes, Blip.fm is developing an iPhone app. DefCab has its own iPhone app as well. Mm-hmm. You have?
Got the Hammer Time app on there, baby.
Hammer Time. Moses is strictly mobile. Tapulous, obviously, too. What kinds of models will we see the most, do you think, in iPhone apps? Will they be purchased music? Purchased apps? Will they be subscription-based apps? What do you see the most going forward?
Jeff said something that was pretty important before. Music commerce sales are pretty tough business. I mean, if you're getting a nickel or song or something, if you sell, millions, it just doesn't make for a business. But the App Store and the ability to pay, and right now, I'm not that happy with the fact that so much stuff is free on the App Store, but I think recurring revenue models are going to start happening on these, where services that you really love, you'll just frankly be willing to pay $1 a month or a couple of bucks a month for them, and only the really, really great ones, and that drives really great economics overall. So that's hopefully where these will head. If you make $1 a user, a few bucks a user, I mean, that's kind of an interesting business, but it's ultimately about going bigger, and then media revenues do kick in.
Mm-hmm. Does anyone else plan a subscription model around an iPhone app?
I mean, I think for, we just launched the Death Cab for Cutie iPhone app within the last couple of months, and it's a free app, and the initial phase of it for us is, it's really, we were looking at it as, okay, this is essentially an extension of the band's website. It's where we're going to go get information. Yeah, there's some really cool features on there, like if you go to the live shows page, you could actually, then just GPS, figure out where the closest date is to you and figure out how to get to the venue, et cetera. But, phase one is really about disseminating information. You could download songs directly. You can go to the band's, online store. So there's some ways to monetize it. But, yeah, we're definitely looking at, going forward, creating a paid app or having, the basic app is free, and then there's kind of an advanced app that you're paying for. Mm-hmm. But I think for right now, where it is, it's, for us, it was just more important. It was a great marketing opportunity for us because not a lot of artists have done it, or the artists that have been doing it primarily have been doing it around the release of a record. So Pink had done one, but it was really to promote a record. Or Fall Out Boy had one around their record, and it was a paid app. And we just looked at it, and, the week that the App Store launched on Apple, I was like, we got to do one for Death Cab. Mm-hmm. And it took so long to find someone to develop it and, the process, et cetera, so it didn't come out until this year. But really, I think the biggest bang for us was the marketing side of it. Apple featured it on their App Store. We haven't downloaded hundreds of thousands, but we've downloaded tens of thousands. Mm-hmm. So,
my app is a multimedia app, and my concept is actually, even as we speak, what I have for the app is being done right now. So the A&E show, which is like pulling, it's going to be pulling teeth, because I'm trying to take a traditional broadcast media firm and say, listen, I have a Hammer Time app in the store. It's a free app because of the numbers that he quoted earlier, 14 million sales last year to go with the 3 that were already. It's about 17 million sales. So if I can get everybody to actually download the app and then stick 11 episodes of my television show on there and then bring my own sponsor aboard and say that the potential audience right now is 17 million, makes me a pretty powerful station. And the sponsor who's willing to pay to have his ad go before the episodes, maybe some integration, which we've already shot one of those episodes, the potential sponsor, I put him on I put him in the show. So he's more inclined to want to sponsor. I'll edit that part out.
Yeah.
But his company spends $100 million. Will spend $100 million on media this year, in particular on television. And so I thought it would be good to have him around and have him take a look at possibly what it could do for his company to be on 17 million phones potentially. So I think the iPhone app has a huge amount of potential. And again, not looking at music first, music is the bonus in this particular case.
To follow up on what Hammer was saying, also, you know, Tapulous has had to think a great deal about whether to have things be free or paid. And it's just a reality of the App Store economics right now that you need an incredible amount of momentum to rocket yourself into the top lists on the iPhone App Store. And if you're not in those top lists, you have no visibility, unless Apple just decides to bless visibility upon you, which is fantastic, but you certainly can't rely upon that. And so you really have to rely upon incredible numbers of downloads. And the way that you get incredible numbers of downloads is to put out a free app. And once you have that free app out there and you have that momentum on one of your products, you can leverage that for other products of yours that are not free, or now that there's been an announcement that there will be in-app commerce, only in paid apps, but you can begin to sell other sorts of products in addition to your premium apps, but you do need that initial momentum, and that's what we found has worked really well at Tapulous.
I'm just curious, too. I heard a rumor out there that the conversion from free apps to paid apps is around 10% of your user base. I'm just curious, have you guys seen similar conversion rates?
I'm not sure that I have numbers specific to that. I mean, I know what our installed base is on the free app versus a total installed base on the premium apps, but I don't think I have the ability to translate, you know, which of those users came from one or went to the other. We probably could dig through the data to find that, but I don't have that on hand. What we do have is, you know, roughly, I want to say 7 or 8 million people on the free app and several 100,000 people on premium apps.
And you're not doing crippleware, you're not stopping the functionality and saying now upgrade.
Oh, absolutely not. Our free app, especially Tap Tap Revenge 2, the one that came out a couple weeks ago, is the most fully featured of all of our apps to date. So we absolutely are not crippling the free app.
One thing I feel like a lot of people are touching on is with regard to subscription services. I mean, when we look at music subscription services of the past, I think of things like Rhapsody and the second incarnation of Napster, where you're subscribing to you're subscribing to a universe of music for a monthly fee, but if you ever cancel your subscription, you don't get anything at the end. So as if you've been renting a universe of music to have around a lot. But it seems like we're talking about converting to a model where you're subscribing to the artist, where you know, whether it's just following them on social media or paying them a monthly fee or some which way that, you know, we're engaging directly. And it sounds like, I mean, Moses, although the user doesn't pay a fee, you're still subscribing to an artist, yes? And
no, I think that's true. I don't think I can directly comment on that from Moses' perspective. We do something very different, which is if you wanted to, you know, get people in a concert, you know, with a raucous crowd like this, you would, you know, ask them to do something, and they might, you know, buy something in the moment, or they might connect with you and find out where they can follow you on Twitter or do whatever else in the moment. So that's what we do. On the question, I think subscription music, I go back and forth. I would tell you that really the free music issue is really just a software problem that will eventually be solved, that we will have to give up the information that says I'm listening to a song and I have to pay something for that song. And that model might be a subscription service, and the artist that whoever gets the most listens is going to benefit from that. That's kind of one view I take. And then the other view is kind of the global village. There's no privacy in the world. When you lived in a village 500 years ago, music was free because, you know, it was just played and you had to listen to it, and, you know, that's the model we're going to see in the future. But I think I'm kind of more in the former camp that subscription is going to be a reality at some point. That at some point there's a toll for the value you get, which is related to listening and enjoying the music, and that's kind of where I see the future. And I don't know how long it will be before that issue is solved.
Well, we are in a global economic meltdown. At a certain point, people are going to want services they are going to have to pay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I think, you know, in kind of taking that question into, you know, two stages, I agree with Doreen. I think of, you know, of all, you know, what's in front of us, and I say this as, you know, being, you know, from the quote unquote traditional music industry side. I do think that subscription is you know, seemingly makes the most sense in terms of how we are going to monetize music, whether that's an artist, you know, subscribing to a certain artist's website or subscriptions to different services. But I do strongly believe in what Hammer's doing, and what you said. I think that, you know, the artist direct model was in a lot of ways the right model, because really it is the artist that people are interested in, and the content that you could put on your website and what you can sell through your website is ultimately is going to be what it's about. I mean, Mark Geiger with Artist Direct thought that, you know, it's about each artist's individual channel. Now, Mark was obviously very early, and we all know that being early is just as bad as being wrong. So it didn't work, and he had to spend a lot of money to try to compete, and they ran out of money, et cetera, et cetera. But I do think that model, or that some form of that model is going to be prevalent. Now, it might be record labels behind the artist's websites in terms of helping to monetize it, and et cetera, but really I think it's going to be, you know, about going to Hammer's site or app, or, you know, whatever the next stage is, or Death Cab for Cuties, or, you know, or the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Yeah, I'll take a little issue with that, because I just think that, you know, there's someone who I've seen many times at panels, I can't remember who always says there's only seven websites anyone visits in any given month, pretty much all the time. And I see the same thing developing with my iPhone behavior, which is there's 7 apps that I return to, and the rest were kind of fleeting for me at the moment.
And there's 7 cable channels you watch.
Right, and so the distribution networks do tend to consolidate, and so I do think there's a model, and Moses does play into this model, which says that there's always going to be something, you know, that's, as an artist, you're going to have to figure out, how do I establish a direct connection to the fans, and how do I maintain that connection in a world that's always shifting? It's going to be interesting to see where that shakes out, because you've got to keep up with it. Like, everything's going to keep changing so that you can keep that.
Yeah, and just to clarify, I'm not suggesting that services like iTunes are going to go away, but I think the ability to monetize as directly to your fans is going to really, that is going to increase drastically in coming years.
Well, you want to be everywhere anyway. I mean, you'll still be on iTunes. You'll be in every community, but you'll steer the ship, and you'll get the bulk of monetization. I mean, again, you can use Twitter and Blip, and you're done in terms of a new artist or an established brand connecting with his base. It's getting simpler and simpler with these platforms.
Yeah, and I do think, and I will say too, and I know I've talked a lot, so I'll shut up after this, but I do really feel like, you know, the role of the record label will not go away, and I think that there's always going to be, I mean, really, as an artist, it's about your goals, and, you know, if you want to be, you know, looking at what's available today in terms of outlets, if you want to really compete at the commercial radio game, if you want to create expensive videos and try to be on MTV or, you know, VH1, if you want, you know, if you want to try to be on the cover of, you know, Rolling Stone magazine, you need someone to help pay for that, or you have to fund it yourselves. But really what a record label provides at this point is expertise, people power, you know, elbow grease, and money. And, you know, if your goal is to sell 15,000 records, well, you might not need that, but still, if you want to compete, the reason why a band like, you know, the Foo Fighters continues to, you know, do one-off deals with RCA is because they need that machine to get on the radio, to help them promote their videos, which is in turn going to sell records, which is going to also sell, more importantly, concert tickets and T-shirts at those concerts. And it's an expensive game to play at that level.
So a lot of this is about retaining people you've got already, but for a developing artist, it might be very different at the earliest stages. I mean, a lot of what you're talking about, using one or two tools and having a lot of prominence, you know, but you're an exceptional artist in this case. I mean, everybody knows your name, right, to start with. So, you know, is it what advice would you give to a developing artist to do that?
Can I take that?
Sure, go ahead, Larry.
Don't quit your day job.
I think Jordan's point is well taken. The last part that he said very low, though, and that was the label will pay for those things. And the things that he described are all things that equate to fame, not necessarily profitability. If you want to get on the cover of the magazine, if you want to be here, if you want to be up the charts, if you want to be on MTV, but none of those things equate to necessarily profit. As a matter of fact, as you know, even at 1 million records sold, if you're lucky and have a great deal, not even a good deal, you'll break even.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. You're gonna make your money on publishing, and you're gonna make your money if you haven't sold your publishing.
Right.
You're gonna make your
So platinum record, not even.
Yeah.
But you'll be famous. Now, so you have to balance those things out in terms of if your goal is to be famous, and then if you know how to monetize fame, because fame is monetizable. So you can monetize the fame. The exchange is that it's probably the equivalent of a 360 deal times 2, right? It's probably the 720 deal in order for a record company today to say that they're going to fund building your brand and allow you to partake of the biggest part of the revenue, right? So that's probably about a 5 to 6 year commitment. So for that particular model, you have to commit to about 5 to 6 years of allowing the label to build your brand. There will be some money made on your side, but you can, if all things are equal, become very famous. And there are artists who would buy into that model right now. So I wouldn't, that is a doable model. However, there are options like Prince did a great thing last year. He cut a deal with the newspaper on Sunday and said, give my album away to everybody who gets the Sunday paper. And everybody looked at him and said, now that's dumb. The record labels, of course. As a matter of fact, they pulled out on him. Right? Record company said, your deal is over with us, blah, blah, blah. Prince gave away his album on Sunday to everybody in London. They got it. And then he announced he had a concert and sold the arena out 30 days and made about $20 million. So, go figure. But I don't mean it like that, but it's a great business model.
I mean, I think the Prince story outlines kind of a big transition we're in, which is once you've got a brand, you're probably in a really great position to then leverage that brand and really figure out how you're going to market in this new age. I'm a big believer, and we did a kind of intern study this summer where we said, who's the marketer of the future of music? Because that's really who's our customer going to be. And labels are right in the running to be marketers of the future. They're going to have to change. They may have to merge with a few management companies. But I really believe the notion, and I think with all respect to Jeff, he understands this better than anyone, the notion that you can quit playing your music and spend all your time online on a dashboard and somehow build your career is completely wrong. So you've got to go focus on your music. Some venture capitalist in the form of a label/management company is going to come along, discover that music, is going to break you for 6 years or 7 years, and then you're going to start to say, okay, what can I do now? And I still think that's going to be the model of the future.
Yeah, and actually, I just add to that, I guess a couple points. I mean, first of all, labels are pretty much identical to VCs. I would say that labels don't do as good of a job pricing risk, and in fact, I would say that you know, and you guys probably have better stats on this, but probably one in 50 artists that a label signs at the major level actually, you know, makes it, so to speak, which is substantially worse than the 1 in 10 at the VC level. But I think a couple points. You know, I think around the labels themselves, you know, my team and I spent a lot of time talking to the majors around a whole series of different topics. But you know, yeah, I agree. The labels will be around, but they will look substantially different going forward. And the other comment is that, you know, artist development is dead, unfortunately. And these VCs that are labels, I don't think, at least I'm not seeing, are nurturing the artists the same way that they used to nurture artists, because it's just too expensive. The economics don't seem to make sense. Which get to the other fundamental issue, which is that artists, particularly these DIY artists, and we worked with a lot of them, they gotta, again, do it on their own. How do they do that? How do they break out of the mold if they don't have a brand, if they're not recognized?
Well, and I think, and I don't mean to interrupt, but I mean, you know, it's still, again, it's totally, and I'm speaking from the perspective of someone who works with, you know, primarily rock bands, right? And you know, it's still about touring, and it's still about connecting with people on a one-to-one basis. And obviously, the internet is a different way and a new way to connect with people on a one-to-one, a relatively new way to connect with people that way. But you know, if I look at my clients who have done well, I mean, my artist Matt Nathanson, he's got a hit at top 40 radio. We have 900,000 paid downloads of a track. He's been doing this for 15 years. He's been touring and playing colleges and playing living rooms and opening for bands. And it, you know, would he be in the same position he is right now, even though he has a great song that's obviously catchy and it's quote unquote, you know, call out researching well? He, you know, he still had to do all these things to get to this place for people to care and for people to react.
Yeah. Most artists seem to make most of their money on the road and, you know, selling merch. Right? So fundamentally, it is interesting as these 360 or 720 deals start becoming, you know, sort of part of the vernacular of major labels. It's unfortunately yet another way that artists get more taken out of their hype.
Well, and that's and you know, and taking back to what Hammer said about you could spend all this money and you could sell a lot of records and you get fame and you're not making any money, but the way that you're making that money is if you've done this work and you started building a fan base on your own, and then someone helps you, you know, if you've been rowing along and then someone sticks a motor on your boat and you start going a lot faster, but you've already built this base to help, you know, to capitalize and to ultimately monetize, you know. Otherwise, you're going the other directions where you have fame, but you don't really have a fan base. I mean, how many people are going to see the Pussycat Dolls these days? You know, it's still the quote unquote, you know, traditional way of building a career, building a fan base. You know?
A lot of you are mentioning, and Jeff did in his presentation, as one component of the business model, that harvesting a lot of data is important. And we've seen this in a lot of industries. We've seen it in baseball, the Moneyball theory, in healthcare, lots of things. It sounds like some of you have mentioned it too. How important is the quantify everything mantra going forward for your businesses? And have we just seen the tip of the iceberg in that? Maybe Larry, you want to go first on that?
Well, you know, targeting is just crucial from a media perspective. So if you don't know where people are, their zip codes, age tax, that kind of stuff, you just lose tremendous value in the CPMs that you can charge. And, you know, so getting that kind of information is key. And mobile, you know, right now, I think has a little bit of an issue that it's really still in the experimental ad budgets as well. So even though you'd think with GPS and other things, you'd have more targeted data, it's just not quite there yet. It needs a little bit more scale. But data is key, and especially with ad budget shrinking, people really want to buy direct context. And in the end, you know, if you want to market to people who listen to certain kinds of music, certain artists, certain things, that's going to be a really important factor.
You mentioned it too?
Data is important to Tapulous on a number of levels. The most obvious is that we partner with labels to get music into our game, and we need to know what music to put into the game, and they need to know what music they want to put into the game. And so the way that we can figure that out with them is to watch what succeeds in the game. So what we found is every Thursday we do what's called Tap Tap Thursdays, and we feature a track. So we promote it to the top level of our game, and everyone who launches the game sees the track and has the opportunity to download it and play it. We get, I think it's on the order of 150,000 downloads of those tracks. The most successful one was Katy Perry. That was 250,000 downloads in 1 week. And that's really good data for us. I mean, we know what bands are selling, in essence, within our game. We also watch who's tapping through to iTunes. So we know conversion rates on what we're vending through our game for free. And that's important to the labels, and it's important to us. I mean, additionally, obviously, we're advertising driven to some extent in the free game, and so knowing what people are interested in terms of their music tastes is important for targeting advertising to them, but also using the elements of the phone, the geographic information, things like that, where we can target them with, you know, better advertising over time. That's very important to us, but it is in its infancy at the moment on the iPhone, and so we're still at a stage in our company where we collect a lot more data than we're actually able to make use of yet. But I think that it's very valuable to collect it.
Yeah, if I may, you know, I'd add that the data is very important. Sometimes it can almost be overwhelming. I mean, we track what our users do on 4 analytics packages, one of which we built ourselves. But it really comes down to a couple things. I mean, number one, what's going to help me make more money? If to the extent you can do better targeting, your CPMs tend to slope up. I know, even in this crazy market, people will pay up for better targeting. So that's clearly important. But number two, it gets around the user experience, really. You know, how can we improve our product by watching exactly what our users are doing? Certain users that may sign up during one particular month, are they around the next month? What are they doing? Are they around 6 months from today? So you can kind of tailor your product, and you can watch how you tweak the product. And again, it's really the analytics and the data that help you make the right decision.
We're going to go to the Q&A session shortly. It's just about 8:30. But let me just ask you one last thing for a real quick comment. What's the cultural upside of all this? Why is this good for everybody? What good is all this technology? Is it just that it's going to help artists in the end, help artists get paid? What's the cultural upside? Why is this a good thing? Sure.
Only because you said artists, what I want to go first, because none of this is about artists, obviously. This is about, you know, business. Mm-hmm. And each gentleman here, maybe exception in this particular case, Jordan, because he's also artist management, and you have the artist's best interest in mind, and it doesn't mean that the rest don't. Larry's also a drummer. He won't say that right now, but he's an artist. So he wears all the venture capitalist / drummer / wife sings. But I left all of that out. I also ended up at his door, which he hasn't mentioned, and that was when he started Pandora originally, when it was called Savage Beast, and I used to go over and visit with his CEO back then. But from an artist perspective, all of these things matter. What you just described a second ago was analytics, and it was based around the standpoint of how the open A's competed on analytics, and, you know, went from looking at a standpoint of, instead of just, you know, ball players who are blasting it out the park or whatever the case was, and we started focusing in on base percentage and all these things. The music industry is a numbers-driven business, so it's a very good comparison. And at the end of the day, the analytics will help artists, but they have to either have management in or a label that cares. The first one who embraces analytics and really use it to compete is going to be way ahead of the curve. It's absolutely right when you take it all and really apply it, in particular localization. So when you localize music and then look at it, you know, on a global basis, the analytics will help you a lot, but what with localization. So I don't think that all of this necessarily is artist-driven, but if the artists have an infrastructure that is into social media, new media, and analytics, he can win with it. It can be very helpful. That's my perspective.
I mean, I think really for what I've seen, I mean, I still, it's been an incredible boon for independent labels and independent artists. And even if independent labels are losing, you know, tens of thousands of record sales because of people, you know, downloading music for free or burning or sharing or whatever, independent labels are able to sell so many more records than they used to. I mean, if you look back to 1998 or 1999, if you were interested, if there was a great, you know, Neutral Milk Hotel, I don't know how many people have heard of them, great, you know, incredibly influential independent rock band, you know, how do you hear about them? College radio, your local weekly, you know, maybe some national press, or your friend called you who's in Chicago and said, I just saw this amazing band at the Double Door last night. If they're coming through San Francisco, go see them. You know, now, you know, fast forward, you know, 5 years, and, you know, whether it's a friend sending out a mass email saying, oh my God, you have to hear this song, you know, it's attached, or Pitchfork writing a great review, or Stereo Gum featuring it, now you have an ability for people to find, you know, tens of thousands of people to find out about something quickly, and then a way to then buy it off of iTunes or buy it on Amazon or whatever it is. So my point being that, you know, really, you know, in the late 90s, the most that an independent rock band would really sell was about 100,000 copies. That was like the brass ring of indie rock sales. Some bands sold more. You know, now you're seeing, you know, whether it's Spoon or the Arcade Fire or, you know, the Shins or Def Cab when they're an independent label selling 300 or 500,000 copies on an independent label. That's not to say that we haven't lost album sales, but it just means you know, to me, it's the fact that it's really helped to connect the dots for independent labels in a way that wasn't available 10 years ago.
And also, I would just think, you know, more exchange of ideas, more art in more hands can't be a bad thing culturally, right?
Yep. Yep.
I think we're going to move along to the question and answer period off these. You want me to start with this one? Is that what you're saying? Oh no, just that one. Okay. Oh, I see. Okay. We're going to go to the Q&A session from the yellow cards. Thanks to everyone. Did you fill out it?
No, but I have a really good one.
Yeah.
So, you know, let me start. I'm a manager. I manage Civic, Alien Ant Farm.
Yeah.
I came up from Hollywood from this. I know Jordan. I've met Hammer before. And there's a couple points that really need to be driven home in this Silicon Valley audience, which is most excellent. One is the development process that's been alluded to here. Hammer mentioned, you know, labels need 5 to 6 years to develop something. Labels don't have 5 to 6 years anymore. And so the answer to your cultural question is we're going to have a lot more artists making a living and a lot less people getting rich. And this is becoming a niche society is what this is. And the value of management, the value of labels is only getting greater because it requires marketing. What's happened in this internet world is it's actually harder to get your message across because there is a mass of information. And therefore, you know, what's being missed in this is how does the developing artist, not the brand, but how does developing artists make money? And we haven't heard an answer to that, and I haven't heard one yet.
Well, with that, here's a good question related. Thank you. I agree with a lot of what you just said very much. Do you see music as the congregator of an audience and relevant sponsorship as the key moneymaker? That's an interestingly phrased question.
I mean, I'll take it. Yes, I see it as a congregator. That's always been the case, whether it was the Global Village Society or you know, I mean, that's what music does, is it brings people together. I think sponsorship is one form of revenue that you can see off of that, for sure. You know, but again, that's going to be very artist-specific. And
what do you make of crowdsourcing sponsorship, the Sell a Band theory or Slice the Pie, companies like that, if you know about them? I don't know if people do, but the idea is that you get your fan base to pony up a few dollars at a time, and then you make a record, and then they get the record. It's sponsorship in advance, basically.
I think it's great. I mean, listen, you know, we manage, you know, my company manages artists of different, you know, different shapes and sizes and different points in their career. So I think for, you know, one of my artists, that might, you know, the idea of a low, you know, a subscription, you know, directly to your fans, and you get a song a month or a record a year, could really work. Is that going to work? I mean, it just, again, it always, I think it always comes down to goals for an artist. And, you know, that can totally work, you know, for the right artist.
Excuse me. We actually have in the audience a gentleman who, Radiohead, who did the great, you know, experiment last year, and I think it would be beneficial to all of us if we could get some numbers from him on the experiment that worked out so well. If you don't mind, because he is right there. And the radio, for those of you who weren't familiar with Radiohead, said name your price. I mean, that was a great name your price. He put the album out there. Was that a successful? Good evening.
Without sounding too cryptic, the best way to answer the question is on a comparable basis, the boys, the artists, made more money, gross and net, than if they had sold 1 million albums within that period of time. It turns out they made then again more, and at the risk of being a little challenging to our conversation earlier, Howard, there are going to be that 20% that just behave off the reservation.
Right.
But bulk of people behave in an honorable way. And even if they're naming their price and you don't like that price, 39 cents beats the crap out of ripping it off from Kazaa or whomever.
Right.
And a lot of people were willing to pony up for that. And it became, not in fact the way we're going to do it going forward, but it has opened up 3 new avenues that we still haven't spoken about yet that we're eager to try and are hopeful for.
I thought it was fantastic. I thought the courage of it was fantastic. I would have been apprehensive because I would have thought that, name your price, 5 cents, you know.
And people did.
Well, but as he said, the majority were honorable, and that needs to be out there more. That story, and the fact that that more money was made hand over fist than the previous models, with only the equivalent of a platinum or a million sales. So thank you very much. I just wanted to share that with the audience.
And I still think the real value of that at the time that Radiohead did that, and the way that Radiohead did that, was in the marketing of it.
Right.
Yeah, because that was, I mean, you couldn't buy that.
They're also in an extraordinary position, being one of the world's most popular bands, if not the world's most popular rock band at that moment, too. You know, as opposed to a developing artist, too.
But being a good marketer in this day and age is the opportunity and the challenge. Is no one is quite sure with the speed at which things change, you know, how do you go about doing it? And some of this platform stuff's going to have to settle out a little bit more before we really see these awesome marketers emerge. But at the end of the day, I think that's also what's going to carry a lot of indie bands or great bands, is how do they market in this world in unique ways that are going to draw attention to them and meet their goals.
I have 2 questions here I'm going to ask simultaneously regarding music and online video. One says, music videos seem to be getting removed from YouTube at a good rate. I know that they had a falling out with at least one of the majors. I thought that it was an amazing music discovery tool. How do artists feel about this? What are the economics involved? And then the other question is, how important a role would digital rights management play in music videos? Would DRM be pervasive, extinct, transformed, or somewhere in between? Anyone?
I think, you know, artists, you know, at least, you know, I can only really speak to the artists that I've spoken to, or my clients, and, you know, I have clients who are divided about YouTube in the same band, you know, where, you know, here's, you know, a company that has made billions of dollars off of someone else's creation or intellectual property. You know, on the one hand, you know, where the other side of it is, well, your video is getting streamed 3 million times, you know, and what is that meaning in terms of the touring business and the merchandising business, et cetera. And I always say with, you know, it's a very interesting time right now, you know, in terms of what, you know, the deal that MySpace struck with major labels, and, you know, that in the advertising world, print advertising and television advertising, this is a structure that's been accepted, it's been determined, experimented, determined, and accepted for decades. And now we're at the cusp of something where we're looking at, well, how do you monetize, you know, how do you monetize content online? And we're still all just trying to figure it out and see what makes sense and what feels right and what doesn't. And these debates, it's still a little bit of a Wild West. So, you know, to me as a manager, I say, of course I want content on YouTube, because that's how you're reaching people. But the other side of it is, yeah, you know, the flip, you know, eventually you want to be paid for that content, you know, and the MySpace model, you know, what's happening with it's going to be really interesting to watch, to see if that actually works.
We have 2 people asking about American Idol. One person says, arguably the most important player in the music industry today is a TV show, American Idol. Comment on your perspectives of how it has impacted the industry. And this other person asks, how do you think television programs like American Idol can foster the artist's growth into online media promotion?
I've talked way too much.
I like American Idol.
Well, no,
I think it's great for a platform for new artists. I shudder to look at the contract. Don't show me the contract. I already know what they look like anyway, so 360 would be a good contract if you go on American Idol. So it's a great platform to get you out there, get your brand known, become famous, and then live out the contract. And hopefully by the time you live out the contract, you can then get a new deal that can be beneficial for you. That's my take on it. Because you can't even go on the show without signing a contract basically that says you won't go on anything else. They have all of your rights.
Yeah.
Is that about right, Jordan?
I'm not intimately familiar with it, but I would guess that you're pretty much, if you're on that show at all, you're giving away all your rights, as you know, in case, you know, whether you win or you're on one episode.
Even after even if you just on 2 or 3 episodes, you can't even enter a deal, at least like, and again, don't hold me to the number, American Idol, but I don't even think you can enter a deal with someone for like a year, even if you go on the show.
You sign your rights away when you try out.
When you try out, there we go.
In the city, you sign all your rights away, pub, masters, touring, merch, when you sign up.
Wow.
And there you have it. I was trying to be nice.
Here's one about crowdsourcing and user-generated content. I hope I can read this. Models in which the core fan base actively participates in content selection and creation, such as with user remixes of a Soulja Boy song, I think that says Crank That, have been successful. How will you engage users in content creation? For instance, will Moses let fans help choose a band's first single from an album?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of part of what we do. We, you know, we do allow bands to use Moses to drive cool activities with the mobile phone that otherwise didn't exist, and that self-expression. I mean, someone asked about indie bands making money, and, you know, it comes down to playing great music and then working really hard and touring and going to little cafes and building your base. And I think Moses, you know, over the next few years has a great role to play in helping do that. And, you know, when you see someone in a cafe and you know, you buy their CD, you're probably not buying that CD and running home and playing it, you know, for the week straight, but you wanted to give that artist $10 as a sign of support. And I think the mobile phone will be a perfect replacement for a way to show your support in the moment, you know, at the time you're inspired, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, I think there's huge upside, not just in mobile, but in web, in terms of how you connect with an audience. And I think back to the marketing question, as these platforms settle out, being able to understand how you're going to best use those, you know, to meet your goals is going to be really key for the artists.
Anyone else? Any other thoughts? No? This one's specifically for Jeff, and I think you can answer this pretty quickly. Are artists paid for music streamed on blip.fm?
So I can answer this at a pretty high level right now, and part of my co-founder, Brian Veneman, spends probably about 75% of his time working directly with the major labels, with the performance rights organizations. You know, I can't really go into specific details, but you know, it's a long negotiation. It's a long process that takes place, and if you want to play in the mainstream music space is just something you have to do. To give you just some, I'm not sure how many folks here are actually thinking or are in music startups, but there's certainly some significant challenges, and this is the thing that typically makes institutional funding sources run for the doors when you walk into the VC meeting. Most of these deals are structured with fairly sizable advances. So if you were to do a financing, let's say you know, $4 or $5 million deal, which might be typical of a Series A, you know, you could expect in some cases 50% potentially going out the door on day one, which gets pretty scary for a lot of you know, for a lot of VCs. Having said that, I think fundamentally the mainstream music players again do have to deal with how do artists get compensated. These are things that again you can work through. If it's an interactive full streaming model, you work directly with the labels. If it's an internet radio play, you work, and Larry can talk about this more directly through Sound Exchange and the PROs.
How long do you think the dollar per download price point will last? And will it go up or down from there? I know we've seen some models where...
Well, variable pricing is going to affect in a few weeks on iTunes, and you're going to see it go up and down and stay the same.
I've also heard of companies that have introduced models where you can more or less voluntarily pay a great deal more for an album and get a deluxe package, which certainly does not cost $150, but is a sign of sponsorship and support, and people are happy to make that gesture sometimes too. Yes.
I just want to tweet Jeff's answer and condense it. He said yes, he does pay artists when the performing rights are worked out through the long-term negotiations. So at the end of the road, you pay, but it's very convoluted process because of all the licenses in between. Is that about? Is it? Yes. So that's what he said.
Thank you.
I think it's important to know that, certain industries have been rather hostile to startups over time, like the cable industry, which created something called Cable Lab. That anybody involved with the Cable Labs related startup in here? Okay. It wasn't fun, was it? So basically, it made it very difficult to innovate, very long sales cycles and things. It was very expensive. And the capital pretty much dried up for sort of cable company related startups. The cable shows were packed in the late 90s, and then they're literally gone. And, I think the music industry is suffering something very similar in terms of real funding going into music-related companies, because they viewed them almost as a source of revenue versus something that's going to grow something for the future. So I think that's just one of the problems the industry has right now, as a lot of the real innovation is moving around it. And I think at some point, as they change that, there'll be a lot of companies that can help them out, but right now it's been very difficult. And nobody's going to put $5 million in a company where 2.5 go out, period.
I hope someone can explain more about this, or can do it better than I can. But what do you think of the way Trent Reznor marketed his last release? And do you think this is a viable option or trend for established artists? It relates to the Radiohead question before. Can someone illuminate that model maybe better than I can?
If I remember correctly, Trent Reznor released his record. I mean, essentially the record was free, but you could kind of upgrade to different, to a super high-end package, CD package. It's so different for someone like him to a developing artist. I think that was really smart of someone in his position. As an aside, I thought it was kind of lame, and I'm not an advocate of, major labels, but, when he went on stage at a festival in Europe and says, major labels suck, steal music, essentially. It's like, well, that's great, Trent. You said that after you've been signed to a major label since the early 90s, and you've sold millions and millions of records and made millions and millions of dollars. And the reason you're playing to 100,000 people right now and able to fire off this missive is because of a major label. But back to the question at hand, I think it was very smart of him, because he has such a dedicated fan base of people that will spend $100 or $200 or $300 to get something that's very well packaged. We're actually, Death Cab, we're actually working with that same company, Artists in Residence, to develop we're going to release a vinyl retrospective. We're doing a vinyl version of all of Death Cab's independent records, and it's going to be a high-end package, and it's going to be limited. And I think it's a great model in terms of how to, different ways to monetize, because you do have that Uber fan that you want to super serve, and you want to spend, that will spend an excessive amount of money to own something that's neat and collectible.
You can drive up the price for a few, and they will account for the price falling elsewhere. But is that sustainable in the long run? Is that
no?
something?
I don't know. I mean, I think it works now. I mean, vinyl sales are obviously vinyl sales increasing. It's kind of a joke. I mean, it's like nothing. They say that it's like not even allowed whatever percent it is. You talk about it's just vinyl sales are increasing because people, on the one hand you have people who don't need to own anything. And then on the other hand, you still have people who want to own something that's nice and sounds good and looks good and you have in your hands and it's tangible and has this beautiful artwork. So I do think that this is a good model for certain artists. And you're going to see it more and more. Labels have over the last few years, the whole thing, the big push has been deluxe editions where it's, you've got your regular release, but then you've got the release with the DVD and the 5 demos and the extra artwork, and you mark that up to $25 as opposed to $15. Is a different way to monetize and to market into gear towards a more fervent fan than just the passive fan who wants to buy the record. So, and iTunes does it too. You have their there's always the $13.99 edition, which maybe has a couple videos and a couple extra songs, and a $9.99 edition, for bigger releases. So.
Just to add, certainly we've seen in talking with the record labels that, and we've found in our own thinking about it as well, that when we partner with a band to do a custom version of the game for them, they view it not as sort of necessarily an additional distribution channel, but more as one of these premium experiences that goes towards having, that premium vinyl edition or that extra DVD that comes. This is an additional thing that a fan that's already purchased the album, perhaps electronically, might purchase to have. In addition, it's an immersive video experience that's customized highly to those artists. So we definitely view it not as sort of a replacement for the album purchase, but as, an upsell, an additional purchase by the big fans.
Mm-hmm. Last one, and I think we have to be quick with this because we're getting very short on time, but comment on the importance of search technology for music.
Wow, can I take that one?
Yeah.
I have a company with some pretty wicked search technology for music that we're going to launch in about a month or so. And if you want a beta of it, or if you want, well, first of all, on Twitter, I'm going to tweet about it, Cyberlar, Cyberlar, and or if you want to just give me a card, I'd love to get you on some kind of beta or give you an early look at it. But I think music is this passion, and when you hear something that you really like, that's really when you want to do stuff with it. And I think that's kind of where Jeff's coming from. It's kind of where the breakthrough is. Hey, music is happening now. And if you can figure out how to not only search for it or ID it, these are just very powerful things. So I think search, just like what happened in Google, it's going to be huge. And having this little computer with you for music search is pretty awesome.
And I'll just chime in that I got a chance to demo it. And I'm going to slide Larry a check. He has one. I mean, it's fantastic. I said to it, okay, Marvin Gaye, what's going on? And the song popped up. It searched and found the video ready, and it queued it, played the videos. It's unbelievable. That's the kind of stuff I like. Gadgets that give me instant gratification on the spot. Wow. Michael Jackson, ABC. And the video came up, the song came up, and I sung it. It also recognizes melody, so I sang a song, and then it said, "Oh," and it found the song. So it's pretty awesome thing Larry has. I'll retweet it when you tweet it. We'll make sure it get out there.
My tweet's worth like a billionth of your tweet.
I'm going to yield the lectern to Hiroshi. He has some final remarks, but before I go, I just want to thank everyone on the panel and want to thank all of you for being here. And for such stimulating discussion, and really a treat for me.